Hare Krishna.
I'm setting up everything. Please let me know if you can hear me now.
Yes, Prabhuji, now
Yes.
we can
Okay.
hear.
No, I was actually setting up, so I didn't want to add my voice there, so I was doing on mute. ॐ अज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाखया चक्षुरुन्मीलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपकथा मह्यं ददति स्वपदान्तिकं वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरो श्रीयुतपदकमलान् श्रीगुरुवैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातं सह गणरघुनाथान्वितां तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधा कृष्णपादान् सहगणललिता श्रीविशाख अन्वितांश्च नमो विष्णुपादाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्तस्वामिनिति नाम्ने नमस्ते सारस्वतीदेवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेषशून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासदि गौर भक्त वृंद हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे. Reading from Śrīla Prabhupāda-līlāmṛta Volume 1, Chapter 20. Stay high forever. But while this was going on, an old man, 1 year past his allotted 70, wandered into New York's East Village and set about to prove to the world that he knew where God could be found. In only 3 months, the man, Swami A.C. Bhaktivedanta, succeeded in convincing the world's toughest audience, Bohemians, acid heads, pot heads, and hippies, that he knew the way to God. Turn off, sing out, and fall in. This new brand of holy man, with all due deference to Dr. Leary, has come forth with a brand of consciousness expansion that's sweeter than acid, cheaper than pot, and non-bustable by fuss. How is all this possible? Through Krishna, the Swami says. From the East Village, other October 1966. Prabhupada's health was good that summer and fall, or so it seemed. He worked long and hard, and except for 4 hours of rest at night, he was always active. He would speak intensively, on and on, never tiring, and his voice was strong. His smiles were strong and charming, his singing voice loud and melodious. During Kirtan, he would thump Bengali mridanga rhythms on his bongo drum, sometimes for an hour. He ate heartily of rice, dal, chapatis, and vegetables with ghee. His face was full and his belly protuberant. Sometimes, in a light mood, he would drum with 2 fingers on his belly and say that the resonance effect affirmed his good health. His golden color had the radiance of youth and well-being preserved by 70 years of health, non-destructive habits. When he smiled, virility and vitality came on so strong as to embrace a faded, desolate New Yorker. In many ways, he was not at all like an old man, and his new followers completely accepted his active youthfulness as a part of the wonder of Swamiji, just as they had come to accept the wonder of the chanting and the wonder of Krishna. Swamiji wasn't an ordinary man, he was spiritual. He could do anything. None of his followers dared advise him to slow down, nor did it ever really occur to them that he needed such protection. They were busy just trying to keep up with him. During the 2 months at 26 Second Avenue, he had achieved what had formerly been only a dream. He now has a temple, a duly registered society, fully freedom to preach, and a band of initiated disciples. When a god brother had written asking him how he would manage a temple in New York, Prabhupada had said that he would need men from India, but that he might find an American or two who could help. That had been last winter. Now Krishna had put him in a different situation. He had received no help from his godbrothers, no big donations from Indian business magnates, and no assistance from the Indian government, but he was finding success in a different way. These were happy days, he says. He had struggled alone for a year, but then Krishna sent me men and money. Yes, these were happy days for Prabhupada, but his happiness was not like happiness of an old man's sunset years as he fades into the dim comforts of retirement. His was the happiness of youth, a time of blossoming of new powers, a time when future hopes expand without limit. He was 71 years old, but in ambition he was he was a courageous youth. He was like a young giant just beginning to grow. He was happy because his preaching was taking hold, just as Lord Chaitanya had been happy when he had traveled alone to South India, spreading the chanting of Hare Krishna. Prabhupada's happiness was that of a selfless servant of Krishna to whom Krishna was sending candidates for devotional life. He was happy to place the seed of devotion within their hearts and to train them in chanting Hare Krishna, hearing about Krishna, and working to spread Krishna consciousness. Prabhupada continued to accelerate. After the first initiations and the first marriage, he was eager for the next step. He was pleased by what he had, but he wanted to do more. It was the greed of the Vaishnava, not a greed to have sense gratification, but to take more and more for Krishna. He would go in like a needle and come out like a plow. That is to say, from a small, seemingly insignificant beginning, he would expand his movement to tremendous proportions. At least that was his desire. He was not content with his newfound success and security at 26 Second Avenue, but was yearning to increase ISKCON as far as possible. This had always been his vision, and he had written in it into the ISKCON Charter to achieve real unity and peace in the world within the members and humanity at large. Swamiji gathered his group together. He knew that once they tried it, they would love it. But it would only happen if he personally went with them. Washington Square Park was only half a mile away, maybe a little more. Ravindra Swarup. He never made a secret of what he was doing. He used to say, I want everybody to know what we are doing. Then one day, D Day came. He said, we are going to chant in Washington Square Park. Everybody was scared. You just don't go into a park and chant. It seemed like a weird thing to do. But he assured us, saying, you won't be afraid when you start chanting. Krishna will help you. And so we trudged down to Washington Square Park, but we were very upset about it. Up until that time, we weren't exposing ourselves. I was upset about it, and I know that several other people were to be making a public figure of yourself. With Prabhupada leading, they set out on their fair Sunday morning, walking the city blocks from 2nd Avenue to Washington Square in the heart of Greenwich Village. And the way he looked, just by walking, he created a sensation. None of the boys had shaved heads or robes, but because of Swamiji, with his saffron robes, his white pointy shoes, and his shaved head held high, people were astonished. It wasn't like when he would go out alone. That brought nothing more than an occasional second glance. But today, with a group of young men hurrying to keep up with him as he headed through the city streets, obviously about to do something, he caused a stir. Tough guys and kids called out names, and others laughed and made sounds. A year ago in Butler, the Agarwals had been sure that Prabhupada had not come to America for followers. He didn't want to make any waves, Sally had thought. But now he was making waves, walking through the New York City streets, headed for the first public chanting in America, followed by his first disciples. In the park, there were hundreds of people milling about stylish, decadent Greenwich villagers, visitors from other boroughs, tourists from other states and other lands, and amalgam of faces, nationalities, ages, and interests. As usual, someone was playing his guitar by the fountain, boys and girls were sitting together and kissing, some were throwing frisbees, some were playing drums or flutes or other instruments, and some were walking their dogs, talking, watching everything wandering around. It was a typical day in the village. Prabhupada went to a patch of lawn where, despite a small sign that read, "Keep off the grass," many people were lounging. He sat down, and one by one his followers sat beside him. He took out his brass hand cymbal and sang the Maha Mantra, and his disciples responded awkwardly at first, then stronger. It wasn't as bad as they had thought it would be. Jagannatha. It was a marvelous thing, a marvelous experience that Swamiji brought upon me because it opened me up a great deal. And as and I overcame a certain shyness the first time to chant out in the middle of everything. A curious crowd gathered to watch, though no one joined in. Within a few minutes, two policemen moved in through the crowd. "Who's in charge here?" an officer asked roughly. The boys looked towards Prabhupada. "Didn't you see the sign?" an officer asked. Swamiji furrowed his brow and turned his eyes towards the sign. He got up and walked to the uncomfortable warm pavement and sat down again, and his followers strangled after to sit around him. Prabhupada continued the chanting for an hour and a half, and crowd stood listening. A guru in America had never gone onto the streets before and sung the names of God. After Kirtan, he asked for a copy of Srimad Bhagavatam and Hayagriva read aloud from the preface. With clear articulation, Hayagriva read, "Disparity in the human society is due to the basic principles of godless civilization. There is God, the Almighty One, from whom everything emanates, by whom everything is maintained, and in whom everything is merged to rest." The crowd was still. Afterward, the Swami and his followers walked back to the storefront, feeling elated and victorious. They had broken the American silence. Allen Ginsberg lived nearby on East 10th Street. One day he received a peculiar invitation in the mail. Practice the transcendental sound vibration. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. This chanting will cleanse the dust from the mirror of the mind. International Society for Krishna Consciousness meetings at 7 a.m. daily, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 7 p.m. You are cordially invited to come and bring your friends. Swamiji had asked the boys to distribute it around the neighborhood. One evening, soon after he received the invitation, Allen Ginsberg and his roommate, Peter Orlovsky, arrived at the storefront in a Volkswagen minibus. Allen had been captivated by the Hare Krishna mantra several years before, when he had first encountered it at the Kumbh Mela festival in Allahabad, India, and he had been chanting it often ever since. The devotees were impressed to see the world famous author of Hall and leading figure of Beat generation enter their humble store front. His advocacy of free sex, marijuana, and LSD, his claims of drug induced visions of spirituality in everyday sights, his political ideas, his exploration of insanity, revolt, and nakedness, and his attempts to create a harmony of like minded souls all were influential on the minds of American young people, especially those living on the Lower East Side. Although by middle class standards he was scandalous and disheveled, he was in his own right a figure of worldly repute, more so than anyone who had ever come to the storefront before. Allen Ginsberg. Bhaktivedanta seemed to have no friends in America, but was alone, totally alone, and gone somewhat like a lone hippie to the nearest refuge, the place where it was cheap enough to rent. There were a few people sitting cross legged on the floor. I think most of them were Lower East Side hippies who had just wandered in off the street, with beards and a curiosity and inquisitiveness and a respect for spiritual presentation of some kind. Some of them were sitting there with glanced eyes, but most of them were just like gentle folk, bearded, hip, and curious. They were refugees from the middle class in the Low East Side, looking exactly like the street sadhus in India. It was very similar that face in American underground history. And I like immediately I liked immediately the idea that Swami Bhaktivedanta had chosen the lower east side of New York for his practice. He'd gone to lower depths. He'd gone to a spot more like the side streets of Calcutta than any other place. Alan and Peter had come for the kirtan, but it wasn't quite time. Prabhupada hadn't come down. They presented a new harmonium to the devotees. It's for the kirtans, said Alan. A little donation. Alan stood at the entrance to the showfront talking with Hayagriva, telling him how he had been chanting Hare Krishna around the world at peace marches, poetry readings, a procession in Prague, a writers' union in Moscow. Secular kirtan, said Alan, but Hare Krishna nonetheless. Then Prabhupada entered. Alan and Peter sat with their congregation and joined in the kirtan. Alan played harmonium. Alan, I was astounded that he had come with the chanting because it seemed like a reinforcement from India. I had been running around singing Hare Krishna, but had never understood exactly why or what it meant. But I was surprised to see that he had a different melody because I thought the melody I knew was the universal melody. I had gotten so used to my melody that actually the biggest difference I had with him was over the tune because I'd solidified it in my mind for years and to hear another tune actually blew my mind. After the lecture, Alan came forward to meet Prabhupada, who was still sitting on his dais. Alan offered his respects with folded palms and touched Prabhupada's feet, and Prabhupada reciprocated by nodding his head and folding his palms. They talked together briefly, and then Prabhupada returned to his apartment. Alan mentioned to Haigriva that he would like to come by again and talk more with Prabhupada, so Haigriva invited him to come the next day and stay for lunch prasadam. Don't you think Swamiji is a little too esoteric for New York? Alan asked. Hayagriva thought, maybe, he replied. Hayagriva then asked Alan to help the Swami since his visa would soon expire. He had entered the country with a visa for a 2 month stay and he had been extending his visa for 2 more months again and again. This had gone on for 1 year, but the last time he had applied for an extension, he had been refused. We need an immigration lawyer, said Hayagriva. I'll donate to that, Alan assured him. The next morning, Allen Ginsberg came by with a check and another harmonium. Up in Prabhupada's apartment, he demonstrated his melody for chanting Hare Krishna, and then he and Prabhupada talked. Alan, I was a little shy with him because I didn't know where he was coming from. I had that harmonium I wanted to donate, and I had a little money. I thought it was great now that was here to expound on the Hare Krishna mantra. That would sort of justify my singing. I knew what I was doing, but I didn't have any theological background to satisfy further inquiries, and here was someone who did. So I thought that was absolutely great. Now I could go around singing Hare Krishna, and if anybody wanted to know what it was, I could just send them to Swami Bhaktivedanta to find out. If anyone wanted to know the technical intricacies and the ultimate history, I could send them to him. He explained to me about his own teacher, about Chaitanya, the lineage going down. His head was filled with so many things and was what he was doing. He was already working on his translations. He always seemed to be sitting there just day after day and night after night, and I think he had one or two people helping him. Prabhupada was very cordial with Ellen, quoting a passage from Bhagavad Gita where Krishna says that whatever a great man does, others will follow. He requested Ellen to continue chanting Hare Krishna at every opportunity so that others would follow his example. He told about Lord Chaitanya's organizing the first civil disobedience movement in India, leading a Sankirtan march against the Muslim ruler. Alan was fascinated. He enjoyed talking with the Swami, but they had their differences. When Alan expressed his admiration for a well known Bengali holy man, Prabhupada said that the holy man was bogus. Alan was shocked. He didn't never before heard a Swami severely criticize another's practice. Prabhupada explained on the basis of Vedic evidence the reasoning behind his criticism, and Ellen admitted that he had naively thought that all holy men were 100% holy. But now he decided that he should not simply accept a sadhu, including Prabhupada, on blind faith. He decided to see Prabhupada in a more severe critical light. Ellen, I had a very superstitious attitude of respect, which probably was an idiot sense of mentality, and so Swami Bhaktivedanta's teaching was very good to make me question that. It also made me question him and not take him for granted. Allen described a divine vision he had had in which William Blake had appeared to him in sound and in which he had understood the oneness of all things. A sadhu in Vrindavan had told Allen that this meant that William Blake was his guru, but to Prabhupada this made no sense. Allen, the main thing about and beyond all our differences was an aroma of sweetness that he had, a personal selfless sweetness like total devotion. And that was what always conquered me. Whatever intellectual questions or doubts I had, or even cynical views of ego, in his presence there was a kind of personal charm coming from dedication that conquered all our conflicts. Even though I didn't agree with him, I always liked to be with him. Alan agreed, at Prabhupada's request, to chant more and to try to give up smoking. Do you really intend to make these American boys into Vaishnavas? Alan asked. Yes, Prabhupada replied happily, and I will make them all Brahmanas. Alan left a $200 check to help cover the legal expenses for extending the Swami's visa and wished him good luck. Brahmanas, Alan didn't see how such a transformation could be possible. September 23, it was Radhastami, the appearance day of Srimati Radharani, Lord Krishna's eternal consort. Prabhupada held his second initiation. Keith became Kirtanananda, Steve became Satsvarupa, Bruce became Brahmananda, and Chuck became Achyutananda. It was another festive day with a fire sacrifice in Prabhupada's front room and a big feast. Prabhupada lived amid the drug culture in a neighborhood where the young people were almost desperately attempting to alter their consciousness, whether by drugs or some other means. Whatever was available, Prabhupada assured them that they could easily achieve the higher consciousness they desired by chanting Hare Krishna. It was inevitable that in explaining Krishna consciousness, he would make allusions to drug experience even if only to show that the two were contrary paths. He was familiar already with Indian sadhus who took ganja and hashish on the plea of aiding their meditations. And even before he had left India, hippies tourists had become a familiar sight on the streets of Delhi. The hippies liked India because of the cultural mystic and easy access to drugs. They would meet their Indian counterparts who assured them that taking hashish was spiritual, and then they would return to America and perpetrate their misconceptions of Indian spiritual culture. It was the way of life. The local head shops carried a full line of paraphernalia marijuana, LSD, peyote, cocaine, and hard drugs like heroin and barbiturates were easily purchased on the streets and in the parks. Underground newspapers reported important news on the drug scene, featured a cartoon character named Captain High, and ran crossword puzzles that only a seasoned head could answer. Prabhupada had to teach that Krishna consciousness was beyond their revered LSD trip. Do you think taking LSD can produce ecstasy and higher consciousness? He once asked his storefront audience. Then just imagine a room full of LSD. Krishna consciousness is like that. People would regularly come in and ask Swamiji's disciples, do you get high from this? And the devotees would answer, oh yeah, you can get high just by chanting. Why don't you try it? Greg Scharf, Brahmananda's brother, hadn't tried LSD, but he wanted higher consciousness, so he decided to try the chanting. Greg, I was 18. Everyone at the storefront had taken LSD, and I thought maybe I should too, because I wanted to feel like part of the crowd. So I asked Umapati, hey Umapati, do you think I should try LSD? because I don't know what you guys are talking about. He said, no, that Swamiji said you didn't need LSD. I never did take it, so I guess it was okay. Hi Griva, have you ever heard of LSD? It's a psychedelic drug that comes like a pill, and if you take it, you can get religious ecstasies. Do you think this can help my spiritual life? Prabhupada, you don't need to take anything for your spiritual life. Your spiritual life is already here. Had anyone else said such a thing, Haigreva would never have agreed with him. But because Swamiji seemed so absolutely positive, therefore there was no question of not agreeing. Satsvarupa, I knew Swamiji was in a state of exalted consciousness, and I was hoping that somehow he could teach the process to me. In the privacy of his room, I asked him, is there spiritual advancement that you can make from which you won't fall back? By his answer, yes, I was convinced that my own attempts to be spiritual on NSD, only to fall down later, could be replaced by a total spiritual life such as Swamiji had. I could see he was convinced, and then I was convinced. Greg. LSD was like the spiritual drug of the times, and Swamiji was the only one who dared to speak out against it, saying it was nonsense. I think that was the first battle he had to conquer in trying to promote his movement on the Lower East Side. Even those who came regularly to the storefront thought that LSD was good. Probably the most famous experiments with LSD in those days were by Timothy Leary and Richard Alpert, Harvard psychology instructors who studied the effects of the drug, published their findings in professional journals, and advocated the use of LSD for self realization and fulfillment. After being fired from Harvard, Timothy Leary went on to become a national priest of LSD and for some time ran an LSD commune in Millbrook, New York. When the members of Millbrook commune heard about the Swami on the Lower East Side who led his followers in a chant that got you high, they began visiting the storefront. One night, a group of about 10 hippies from Millbrook came to Swamiji's kirtan. They all chanted, not so much in worship of Krishna as to see what kind of high the chanting could produce. And after the lecture at Millbrook, leader asked about drugs. Prabhupada replied that drugs were not necessary for spiritual life, that they could not produce spiritual consciousness, and that all drug-induced religious visions were simply hallucinations. To realize God was not so easy or cheap that one could do it just by taking a pill or smoking. Chanting Hare Krishna, he explained, was a purifying process to uncover one's pure consciousness. Taking drugs would increase the covering and bar one from self realization. But have you ever taken LSD? The question now became a challenge. No, Prabhupada replied. I have never taken any of these things, not even cigarettes or teas. If you haven't taken it, then how can you say what it is? The mill broker looked around smiling. Two or three even burst out with laughter and they snapped their fingers, thinking the Swami had been checkmated. I have not taken, Prabhupada replied regal, regally from his dais. But my disciples have taken all these things, marijuana, LSD, many things, and they have given them all up. You can hear from them. Haigriva, you can speak. And Haigriva sat up a little and spoke out in his stentorian best. Well, no matter how high you go on LSD, you eventually reach a peak and then you have to come down back. You have to come back down, just like traveling into outer space in a rocket ship. He gave one of Swamiji's familiar examples. Your spacecraft can travel very far away from the Earth for thousands of miles day after day, but it cannot simply go on traveling and traveling. Eventually, it must land. On LSD, we experience going up, but we always have to come down again. That's not spiritual consciousness. When you actually attain spiritual or Krishna consciousness, you stay high because you go to Krishna. You don't have to come down, you can stay high forever. Prabhupada was sitting in his back room with Hayagriva and Umapati and other disciples. The evening meeting had just ended and the visitors from Millbrook had gone. Krishna consciousness is so nice, Swamiji. Umapati spoke up. You just got higher and higher, and you don't come down. Prabhupada smiled. Yes, that's right. No more coming down, Umapati said, laughing, and the others also began to laugh. Some clapped their hands, repeating, No more coming down. The conversation inspired Haigriva and Umapati to produce a new handbill. Stay high forever. No more coming down. Practice Krishna consciousness. Expand your consciousness by practicing the transcendental sound vibration. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. The leaflet went on to extol Krishna consciousness over any other high. It included phrases like end all bring downs and turn on, and it spoke against employing artificially induced methods of self-realization and expanded consciousness. Someone objected to the flyers playing too much of the hippie mentality, but Prabhupada said it was all right. Greg. When these drug people on the lower east side came and talked to Swamiji, he was so patient with them. He was speaking on on a philosophy which they had never heard before. When someone takes LSD, they are really into themselves, and they don't hear properly when someone talks to them. So Swamiji would make particular points and they wouldn't understand him. So he would have to make the same point again. He was very patient with these people, but he would not give in into their claim that LSD was a bona fide spiritual aid to self-realization. October 1966, Tompkins Square Park was a park on the Lower East Side. On the south, it was bordered by 7th Street with its 4 and 5 storied brownstone tenements. On the north side was 10th with more brownstones but in better condition, and the very old small building that housed the Tompkins Square branch of the New York Public Library. On Avenue B, the park's east border, stood St. Brigid's Church, built in 1848, when the neighborhood had been entirely Irish. The church school, the rectory, still occupied much of the block, and the west border of the park, Avenue A, was lined with tiny old candy stores selling newspapers, magazines, cigarettes, and cream sodas. All the counters. There were also a few bars, several grocery stores, and a couple of Slavic restaurants specializing in inexpensive vegetable broths, which brought Ukrainians and hippies side by side for bodily nourishment. The park's 10 acres held many tall trees, but at least half the park was paved. A network of 5 foot high, heavy wrought iron fences waved through the park, lining the walkways and protecting the grass. The fences and the many walkways and entrances to the park gave it the effect of a maze. Since the weather was still warm and it was Sunday, the park was crowded with people. Almost all the space on the branches that lined the walkways was occupied. There were old people, mostly Ukrainians, dressed in outdated suits and sweaters, even in the warm weather, sitting together in clans, talking. There were many children in the park also, mostly Puerto Ricans and blacks, but also fair-haired, hard-faced, slumped kids racing around on the bikes or playing with balls and frisbees. The basketball and handball courts were mostly taken by the teenagers, and as always, there were plenty of loose running dogs. A marble miniature gazebo, 4 pillars and a roof with a drinking fountain inside, was a remnant from the old days 1891, according to the inscription. On its 4 sides were the words hope, faith, charity, and temperance. But someone had sprayed the whole structure with black paint, making crude design and illegal names and initials. Today, a bench had been taken off by several Congo and Bongo drummers, and the whole park pulsed with their demanding rhythms. And the hippies were there, different from others. The bearded Bohemians men, their long haired young girlfriends dressed in old blue jeans, were still an unusual sight. Even in the Lower East Side melting pot, their presence created tension. They were from middle class families, and so they had not been driven to the slums by dire economic necessity. This created conflicts in their dealings with the underprivileged immigrants. And the hippies' well known proclivity for psychedelic drugs, their revolt against their families and affluence, and their absorption in the avant-garde sometimes made them the jaded minority among their neighbors. But the hippies just wanted to do their own thing and create their own revolution for love and peace. So usually they were tolerated, although not appreciated. There were various groups among the young and hip at Tompkins Square Park. They were friends who had gone to the same school together, who took the same drug together, or who agreed on a particular philosophy of art, literature, politics, or metaphysics. There were lovers. There were groups hanging out together for reasons undecipherable except for the common purpose of doing their own thing. And there were others who lived like hermits. A loner would sit on a park bench analyzing the effects of cocaine, looking up at the strangely rustling green leaves of the trees and the blue sky above the tenements and then down to the garbage at his feet as he helplessly followed his mind from fear to illumination to disgust to hallucination on until after a few hours the drug began to wear off and he was again a common stranger. Sometimes they would sit up all night, spaced out in the park until at last, in the light of morning, they would stretch out on the benches to sleep. Hippies especially took to the park on Sundays. They at least pass through the park on their way to St. Mark's Place, Greenwich Village, or the Lexington Avenue subway at Astor Place, or the Ind subway at Houston and 2nd, or to catch an uptown bus on First Avenue, a downtown bus on 2nd, or across town on Ninth. Or they went to the park just to get out of their apartments and sit together in the open air, to get high again, to talk or to walk through the park's maze of pathways. But whatever the hippies' diverse interests and drives, the Lower East Side was an essential part of the mystic. It was not just a dirty slum, it was the best place in the world to conduct experiment in consciousness. For all its filth and threat of violence and the confined life of its brownstone tenements, the Lower East Side was still the forefront of the revolution in the mind expansion. Unless you were living there and taking psychedelic or marijuana or at least intellectually pursuing the quest for free personal religion, you weren't enlightened and you weren't taking part in the most progressive evolution of human consciousness. And it was this searching, a quest beyond the humdrum existence of the ordinary materialistic straight American, that brought unity to the otherwise eclectic gathering of hippies on the Lower East Side. Into this chaotic pageant, Swamiji entered with his followers and sat down to hold a kirtan. Three or four devotees who arrived ahead of him selected an open area of park, put out the oriental carpet Robert Nelson had donated, sat down on it, and began playing kartal and chanting Hare Krishna. Immediately, some boys rode up on their bicycles, braked just short of the carpet, and stood astride their bikes, curiously and irreverent, irre, irreverently, sorry, irreverentially, irreverentially staring. Other passerby gathered to listen. Meanwhile, Swamiji, accompanied by half a dozen disciples, was walking the eighth block from the storefront. Brahmananda carried the harmonium and the Swami's drum. Kirtanananda, who was now shaven headed at Swamiji's request and dressed in loose flowing canary yellow robes, created an extra sensation. Driver pulled their cars over to have a look. The passengers leaning forward, agape at the outrageous dress and shaved head. As the group passed a store, people inside would poke each other and indicate the spectacle. People came to the windows of their tenements, taking in the Swami and his group as if a parade were passing. The Puerto Rican tough guys especially couldn't restrain themselves from exaggerated reactions. Hey Buddha, they taunted. Hey, you forgot to change your pajamas. They made shrill screams as if imitating Indian war whoops they had heard in Hollywood westerns. Hey Arabs! Exclaimed one heckler, who began imitating what he thought was an Eastern dance. No one on the street knew anything about Krishna consciousness nor even of Hindu culture and customs. To them, the Swami's entourage was just a bunch of crazy hippies showing off, but they didn't quite know what to make of the Swami. He wasn't, he was different. Nevertheless, they were suspicious. Somehow, like Irving Halpans, a veteran Lower East Side resident, felt sympathetic toward this stranger who was apparently a very dignified person on a peaceful mission. Irving Halpern, a lot of people had sp- spectacularized notions of what a Swami was, as though they were going to suddenly see people lying on little mattresses made out of nails and all kinds of other absurd notions. Yet here came just a very graceful, peaceful, gentle, obviously well-meaning being into a lot of hospitality. Hippies. What are they? Communists? While the young taunted, the middle-aged and elderly shook their heads or stared, cold and uncomprehending. The way to the park was spotted with blasphemies, ribald jokes, and tension, but no violence. After the successful Kirtan in Washington Square Park, Prabhupada had regularly been sending out parades of 3 or 4 devotees chanting and playing hand cymbals through the streets and sidewalks of the Lower East Side. On one occasion, they had been bombarded with water balloons and eggs, and they were sometimes faced with bullies looking for a fight. But they were never attacked, just stared at, laughed at, and shouted after. Today, the ethnic neighbors just assumed that Prabhupada and his followers had come onto the streets dressed in outlandish costumes as a joke, just to turn everything topsy turvy and cause stays and howls. They felt that their responses were only natural for any normal, respectable American slum dwellers. So it was quite an adventure before the group even reached the park. Swamiji, however, remained unaffected. What are they saying? He asked once or twice, and Brahmananda explained. Prabhupada had a way of holding his head high, his chin up, as he walked forward. It made him look aristocratic and determined. His vision was spiritual. He saw everyone as a spiritual soul and Krishna as the controller of everything. Yet aside from that, even from a worldly point of view, he was unafraid of the city's pandemonium. After all, he was an experienced Calcutta man. Kirtan had been going for about 10 minutes when Swamiji arrived, stepping out of his white rubber slippers, just as if he were home in the temple. He sat down on the rug with his followers, who had now stopped their singing and were watching him. He wore a pink sweater and around his shoulder a khadi wrapper. He smiled. Looking at his group, he indicated the rhythm by counting 1, 2, 3. Then he began clapping his hands heavily as he continued counting 1, 2, 3. The Kirtan Kartals followed, at first with wrong beats, but he kept the rhythm by clapping his hands, and then they got it, clapping hands, clashing cymbals artlessly to a slow, steady beat. He began singing prayers that no one else knew. Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavamsha. His voice was sweet like the harmonium, rich in the nuance of Bengali melody. Sitting on the rug under a large oak tree, he sang the mysterious Sanskrit prayers. None of his followers knew any mantra but Hare Krishna, but they knew Swamiji, and they kept the rhythm, listening closely to him while the trucks rumbled on the street and the Congo drums pulsed in the distance. As he sang Sri Rupam Sagrajatam, the dogs came by. Kids stared, a few mockers pointed fingers. Hey, who is that priest man? But his voice was a shelter beyond the clashing duality. His voice were his voice went on ringing cymbals while he sang alone Sri Radha Krishna Padan. Prabhupada sang prayers in praise of Srimati pure Radharani's pure conjugal love for Krishna, the beloved of the gopis. Each word passed down for hundreds of years by the intimate associates of Krishna who saturated with deep transcendental meaning that only he understood. Saha Gana Lalita Sri Vishaka Anvitamscha. They waited for him to begin Hare Krishna, although hearing him chant was exciting enough. More people came, which was what Prabhupada wanted. He wanted them chanting and dancing with him, and now his followers wanted that too. They wanted to be with him. They had tried together at the UN and Anand Ashram and Washington Square. It seemed that this would be the thing they would always do, go with Swamiji and sit and chant. He would always be with them chanting. Then he began the mantra Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. They responded, too low and muddled at first, but he returned it to them again, singing it right and triumphant. Again they responded, gaining heart, ringing kartals, and clapping hands. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Again he sang it alone, and they stayed, hanging closely on each word, clapping, beating cymbals, and watching him, looking back at them from his inner concentration, his old age wisdom, his bhakti, and out of love for Swamiji, they broke loose from their surroundings and joined him as a chanting congregation. Swamiji played his small drum, holding its strap in his left hand, bracing the drum against his body with his right hand, playing intricate mridanga rhythms. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. He was going strong after half an hour, repeating the mantra, carrying them with him as interested onlookers gathered in greater number. A few hippies sat down on the edge of rug, copying the cross-legged sitting posture, listening, clapping, trying the chanting, and the small inner circle of Prabhupada and his followers grew as gradually more people joined. As always, his kirtan attracted musicians. I ring halpan. I make flutes and I play musical instruments. There are all kinds of different instruments that I make. When the Swami came, I went up and started playing, and he welcomed me. Whenever a new musician would join and play their first note, he would extend his arms. It would be as though he had stepped up to the podium and was going to lead the New York Philharmonic. I mean, there was this gesture that every musician knows. You just know when someone else wants you to play with them and feels good that you are playing with them. And this very basic kind of musician communication was there with him, and I related to it very quickly, and I was happy about it. Lone musicians were always loitering in different parts of the park, and when they heard they could play with the Swamis chanting and that they were welcome, then they began to come by one by one. A saxophone player came just before because there was such a strong rhythm section to play with. Others, like Irving Halpern, saw it was something spiritual with good vibrations. As the musicians joined, more passerby were drawn into the kirtan. Prabhupada had been singing both lead and chorus, and many who had joined now sang the lead part also, so that there was a constant chorus of chanting. During the afternoon, the crowd grew to more than 100, with a dozen musicians trying with their congos and bongos, drums, bamboo flutes, metal flutes, mouth organs, wood and metal clackers, tambourines, and guitars to stave the Swami. Irving harpen, the park resounded. The musicians were very careful in listening to the mantras. When the Swami sang Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, there was sometimes a Krishna, a triple of what had been a double symbol. It would be usually on the first stanza, and the musicians really picked up on it. The Swami would pronounce it in a particular way, and the musicians were really meticulous and listened very carefully to the way that Swami would sing. And we began to notice that there were different melodies for the same brief sentence, and we got to count on that one regularity, like one would count on the conductor of an orchestra or the lead singer of a madrigal. It was really pleasant, and people would dig one another in their trips. They would say, "Hey, see," we would catch and repeat a particular subtle pronunciation of a Sanskrit phrase that the audience, in their enthusiasm, while they would be dancing or playing, had perhaps missed. Or the Swami would add an extra beat, but it meant something in the way in which the drummer, who at that time was the Swami, the main drummer, would hit the drums. I have talked to a couple of musicians about it, and we agreed that in his head this Swami must have had hundreds and hundreds of melodies that had been brought back from the real learning from the other side of the world. So many people came there just to tune in the musical gift, the transmission of the Dharma. Hey, they would say, listen to this holy monk. People were really sure there were going to be unusual feats, grandstanding, flashy levitation, or whatever people expected was going to happen. But when the simplicity of what the Swami was really saying, when you began to sense it, whether you were motivated to actually make a lifetime commitment and go this way of life, or whether you merely wanted to appreciate it and place it in a place and give certain due respect to it, turned you around. It turned you around. And that was interesting too. The different ways in which people regarded the kirtan. Some people thought it was a prelude. Some people thought it was a main event. Some people liked the music. Some people liked the poetic sound of it. Then Allen Ginsberg and Peter Orlovsky arrived, along with some of their friends. Allen surveyed the scene and found a seat among the chanters. With his black beard, his eyeglasses, his bald spot surrounded by long black ringlets of hair, Allen Ginsberg, the poet Partridge, come to join the chanting, greatly enhanced the local prestige of Kirtan. Prabhupada, while continuing his ecstatic chanting and drum playing, acknowledged Allen and smiled. A reporter from the New York Times dropped by and asked Allen for an interview, but he refused. A man should not be disturbed while worshipping. The Times would have to wait. Allen Tom Tompkins Square Park was a hotbed of spiritual conflict in those days, so it was absolutely great. Absolutely great. All of a sudden, the midst of all the talk and drugs and theory, for some people to put their bodies, their singing, to break through the intellectual ice and come out with total bhakti. That was really amazing. The blacks and Puerto Ricans were out there with drums too, doing Congo. But here was a totally different kind of group, some of them with shaven heads, and it was interesting. It was a repetitious chant, but that was also great. It was an easy chant to get into. It was an open scene. There was no boxed corner there in the actual practice. So general smiles and ap- approval and encouragement as a beginning of some kind of real communal get together in the park with a kind of serious underbass for exchange instead of just dog on the drums. Prabhupada was striking to see. His brow was furrowed, furrowed in the effort of singing loud, and his vision was strong. His visage was strong. The veins in his temple stood out visibly. His jaws jutted forward as he sang his Hare Krishna for all to hear. Although his demeanor was pleasant, his chanting was intensive, sometimes straining, and everything about him was concentration. It wasn't someone else yoga retreat or silent peace vigil, but a pure chanting being for Prabhupada's own doing. It was a new wave, something everyone could take part in. The community seemed to be accepting it. It became so popular that the ice cream vendor came over to make sales. Beside Prabhupada, a group of young blonde haired boys, 5 or 6 years old, were just sitting around. A young Polish boy stood staring. Someone began burning frankincense on a glowing coal in a metal strainer, and the sweet fumes billowed among the flutists, drummers, and chanters. I'll stop after this para. Swamiji motioned to his disciples and they got up and began dancing. Tall, thin Sriyadhisha, his back pockets stuffed with stay high forever flyers, raised his hands and began to dance. Beside him, in a black turtleneck, big chanting beads around his neck, danced Achyutananda. His curly, almost frizzy hair long and disarrayed. Then Brahmananda got up. He and Achyutananda stood facing each other, arms outreached as in the picture of Lord Chaitanya's Kirtan. Photographers in the crowd moved forward. The boys danced, shifting their weights from left foot to the right foot, striking a series of angelic poses. Their large red chanting beads around their neck, they were doing the Swami step. Brahmananda. Once I got up, I thought I would have to remain standing for as long as Swamiji played the drum. It will be an offense, I thought, if I sit down while he is still playing. So I danced for an hour, and we are an hour. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Thank you.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Yeah. So there was a lot of drugs that time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What to do? What to do? The
So it
world
was
want to go somewhere, but they need the right vehicle to go.
so it was legalized to buy and sell. I mean, it was available on the streets.
Yeah, yeah.
That time.
It's legal, and I think it's also more black, not only legal. I don't know whether you know, just yesterday there was a big announcement in Germany. In Germany, what is this? Trees? Marijuana and yeah, this LSD, whatever the trees that are needed. I forgot the name. They are legal. One can cultivate them legally, even at home. Up to 3 to 4 or 5 plants one can have at home backyard.
Yeah. Okay. So don't need to buy.
Yeah, I mean, it depends how much you want to be on that. But no, actually, I was reading yesterday that the Germany is doing this so that it can help pharmaceuticals. Yeah, because these herbs, yeah, are so helpful in solving some kind of psychological diseases. So psychedelic problems, psychiatrists, and all those things. Now, this will be highly helpful for them to restore against depression, anxiety, and all these kind of things. So that's why they were think. I read that they said, yeah, if you don't make it legal, there is a lot of black. Yeah, so better make it white. And there are so many. I mean, there are a couple of pharmaceuticals which are already put some billions of euros in it, and they are expecting the first crop from it. I mean, yeah. So weed cultivation is legal in Germany. And if I've seen the comments in the YouTube on this announcement, all people from all over the world are praising Germany for like anything, making it all available. See how advanced is Germany. They will be producing first class weeds and LSD drugs. Yeah, that's where we are. In which yuga we are? Kali Yuga.
Yes, Prabhuji. Yeah. Mm.
We have to be very careful.
Maybe the maybe people from the government could come to your place. You have a big garden.
Yeah,
Help
yeah.
us.
Yeah. No, government will give me attractive offers, no? Saying, hey, you have nice field. And of course, it has to be enclosed. Yeah. The trees should not grow. I mean, shouldn't come to a flower level. There are some kind of things. If it comes to that level, then you have to cultivate it outside. Otherwise, you can cultivate with lights and everything inside. Whatever we are using now for Tulsi Maharani, the same lights which can be used for cultivating, yeah, these weeds. Yeah. Yeah. So, but it was a legendary moment. Yeah. If we go back to 1970s, so it was a moment where Prabhupada dealt with really serious people. Was not so easy thing. Now it looks very easy, right? Like, okay, there is government, there is police, security, and all. Those days, and we also have a big support in the back in the name of ISKCON, International Society, all over world recognized. In those days, it was nothing like that. It was only like, yeah, just imagine. There was a Prabhu, we walk to a park and sit there and do chanting. We don't know what will happen, but we see what Prabhupada did. Yeah, it was so nice arrangement of Krishna to prove the success, but it was not like this, right? So it was like who would have imagined to go to a slum area, yeah, that to a Brahman or a Vaishnava, not even Brahman, a Vaishnava who maintains a very high standards for himself, who expects that everyone should be at that level, who everyone should be a Brahman, civilized, Vedic civilized person. But if he turns 360 degrees, he will find only people who are drug addicts, yeah, who doesn't know anything about Vedic culture. To be just imagining ourselves to be in a situation would scare us, right? Where is the security? Where is safety? We are one man. How much can we do? Prabhupada was pushing hard against, very boldly preaching that LSD is not the solution. Hmm. We would try to be away from people who are drug addicts. No, we don't know what will happen to us. Okay, anything else?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
I mean, while when you are reading the chapter, it was, I mean, we are so engrossed in the while reading that it still looks so unbelievable that Prabhupada has just one man mission in a place where it's filled with dirt. He chanted the holy name. I mean, sometimes I feel that maybe during that time, India had maybe different issues compared to US. But even most of the people in India, we were immersed maybe in our own debates that, yeah, Prabhupada started the Krishna consciousness from the West. And today, yeah, we are also learning from the Western devotees.
Yeah.
So maybe I thought we had maybe during that time we had less problems, but some different problems. Maybe the Indian population.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I mean, if hippies can actually get attracted to the holy name as such, it is so powerful.
Hmm.
I think it should be possible to any person.
And very interestingly, such drug addicts have given up alcohol or intoxication, drugs, even not even alcohol. Alcohol also maybe, yeah, you still have a better control. Giving up LSD, these kind of intoxications, right, is not so easy.
Yes, Prabhuji.
We are struggling. If we see on news, we see so many how to overcome these kind of bad habits, right? Still, people are struggling and struggling. They will try for 1 month, 2 months, maybe max 1 year, but again they get addicted. Go back to their yeah. Uh, mm, they are in the mode of assuming the failure already. Yeah? I don't believe that I can be changed. But we see here there was no, like, Prabhupada is not saying give up, give up. Yeah, it's more like they got a higher taste. Yeah?
Yes, Prabhuji.
And they had complete faith in Prabhupada. So these were two powerful things through which. So yeah, when we have a um, firm dedication towards a spiritual master, yeah, or here they haven't even accepted him as spiritual master. Yeah, just accept him he as a guide, like Siksha Guru, or right. So in that level, just giving knowledge. He's not about Diksha, about the parampara, connection, discipline, succession, nothing like. Here he's talking about philosophy. He's connecting to Krishna, but more of a knowledge. Why should one not take drugs? So all these things, they had so much conformity and acceptance of Prabhupada. Yeah, and that was the key that they were able to give up. If even if there is a sense of doubt on master, yeah, if one has a doubt, okay, no, I don't really believe in it, what he's saying, yeah, then there is a chance of delaying advancement, progress. But they had so much conviction, whatever Prabhupada said, yes, they did it. Just like in this part we were reading about Prabhupada, when he was saying that, yeah, you go higher, but you will fall down. But
Yes.
in spiritual, you will be stay high forever.
Yes, Prabhuji.
It's a theory, right? For a third party, it's just a theory. But because it is backed up by so much faith they had in Prabhupada, yeah, faith in the master, and that was what is the key factor to take it up, to try it, and then you can continue in that process. Then you don't have any time for anything else. And then you're also carried away with the ecstasy that we are getting in this, seeing, hey, see, no one dared to do a kirtan in a park.
Yes,
Of
Prabhuji.
course, one would do for amusement, for entertainment. That is of different setup. Only few of their people will come. It's a closed group corner, yeah. But Prabhupada was opening a door to everyone in the whole park. Anyone can come, sing, play instruments, be part of it. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think in the previous chapters also, I think there was one conversation where I think one person tells Prabhupada that it would be better if you can stay in India and then practice or spread the message rather than going so far. But this is all, I think, a great plan of Krishna that only a Mahabhagavat like Śrīla Prabhupada can only do. That going
Yeah.
into an unknown waters, which is dirty, filled with drugs and everything, like a country like US, and then changing it, and
Yeah.
then that is, yeah, I mean,
Yeah, I
unbelievable.
think, do you know this, that the swans have the ability to separate milk from water? You know this?
Hamsa.
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 Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
Hamsa. Yeah.
So the Paramahamsas, right? Only they
Yes. Yes.
can do that, filtering out the purity within the contaminated area.
Yes, Prabhuji. I think only Śrīla Prabhupada can do this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, undoubted.
Undoubtedly.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, thank you, Prabhuji. Yeah. Śrīla Prabhupada-līlāmṛta continues to inspire.
Yeah, I think I don't know. I think it was Rupa and who else, I don't know. They were suggesting let's read Prabhupada-līlāmṛta. Yeah, so once a week, it's a nice novel reading, but it's not just novel, we know it's a reality. So that's why we are able to even appreciate more.
Yes, Prabhuji.
Yeah,
Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare
yeah,
Krishna.
thank you. Hare Krishna. And Sesha Sai Prabhu, you're seeing the movement, Prabhupada movement, how he's driving things.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Shesh, Sai Prabhu and Lakshan went out. They're
Acha.
not. Yes, sorry, Prabhuji. But it's
No
so
worries.
Prabhupada was there enough to do first Kirtan in USA and really inspired so many. But
Yeah.
now I feel like cereals are even more dangerous. People are not able to come out from that intoxicants. Our elders.
You mean daily cereals at home?
Yes, yes, Prabhuji.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, we only have to bribe these channels to not telecast anymore, these kind of things.
Yes, Prabhuji. Right. It's very difficult to get
But I
them.
think, but the thing is that if it is not one kind of intoxication, it will be other unless they get bhakti, right? So it is not, we can't blame TV, yeah, because are you seeing daily serials? Are you seeing TV? Are you seeing sports? Nothing, right? We can't blame them. It is that if it is, I think today, have you read or it will come tomorrow? A rich man has nothing to do, so his mind is devil's advocate. I mean, yeah, it's like a devil. I don't know. It will come tomorrow. Hmm? So it's like that. So when we have so much wealth of free time, if we don't know where to put, we will just misuse in something else. It was not that this is only because of the TVs that everything is messed up, but yeah, what to
Yes,
do?
yes, Prabhuji, definitely. Prabhupada is so merciful that he said smoke addictors. He wanted to turn them as Brahmins.
Yeah,
Really amazing.
yeah. Yeah, I think there are so many. I mean, of course, in the daily TV channels also there are these daily episodes like Sai Baba, or there is also Vishnu Puran. No, there are so many
Yeah,
also devotional things. Yeah,
yeah.
but the problem is that one full dedicated TV channel for devotion also is there. People don't take to it.
Yes, Prabhuji.
So the instrument is good. How we use.
Yeah, day by day it's getting worse actually. Serials affect every day by day. Yeah.
Yeah, people are scared to go out. So
Mm,
they, what will they do at home
yeah.
when there are a lot of thefts that are going outside, stealing, and life safety is gone? All these things are there. Uh, where will they go? Going outside is more expensive, right? If you go out, you go for shopping only. I think these days people go out only for shopping.
Yes, Prabhuji, right. Especially because of COVID and all, people are at homes only.
Yeah, so
Mm,
they turn to the TVs.
yeah.
Yeah, those days were gone where reading Bhagavatam, reading Bhagavad Gita. Yeah, is gone. That
Mm,
culture is broken. And yeah, I mean, I'm really happy that being in Germany, we see that not so many people are addicted to TV that much yet because of their crappy advertisements. Their advertisements are not so attractive. Yeah, if you, it's not so attractive like Indian advertisements. The programs, yeah, are sometimes kind of quite adventurous, but how long they will attract people like that? The people want real adventure. They are not like us, like Indians who want to see the match, cricket match. They want to really see, hey, I want to be part of playing the match. Huh? That kind of people. So they are not yet attracted to the TVs. They want to really do adventures on their own for themselves. Yeah, in one way, good. They have at least a chance we can get in touch with them somewhere or the other place.
yes, Prabhuji. Thank you, Prabhuji. Thanks for this opportunity to hear every Thursday. Thank you.
And thank you all for joining. Of course, during holiday time, yeah, we may not have everyone present, but yeah, my service is to keep on start and continue doing. Even if one will join, I am blessed because I can at least read. Thank you so much. And Saturday, Sunday we'll not have classes. I'll also post in the group because we'll be in Golokadam. Yeah, for your info. वञ्चाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्येव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः. Śrīla Prabhupāda ki jai, His Holiness Satsvarupa Goswami Maharaj ki jai. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.